Fall is in the air. Fall is my favorite season of the year, and I am so excited for the leaves to change and for it to get a little bit cooler. And so in today's video, I've painted 4 Polaroid watercolor paintings to welcome in the season. Hi everyone, my name is Sarah, and I'm excited to share these 4 sweet little fall paintings with you. Watercolor Polaroids are a super fun way to commemorate a trip or to focus in on the details of a season that you really like. These are not high risk because they are so small. These Polaroid paintings are about 3 inches by 3 inches, maybe 4 if I'm being really brave. And so I encourage you to pick a subject matter you love and try this out. You don't need to be very precise with the Polaroid dimensions. Just leave extra space at the bottom and have smaller margins on the top in order to get that Polaroid effect. I'm doing my paintings all on one sheet of watercolor paper that I divided up. I normally don't use washi tape when I'm painting. Usually I use blue painter's tape, but I didn't think it would be cute for this video, so I'm using this washi tape, which I actually kind of struggle with a little bit, but and it's upside down. Oh well. I am going to be painting a cabin in the woods, a misty sky, a pumpkin patch, and then the texture of plaid. I think that really reminds me of fall. So the reason I chose all of these is because these are things that come to mind when I think of the season of fall. I really love going to a cabin. I really love kind of a blustery day and a pumpkin patch, and I love wearing my flannel. So this all gets at the aesthetic I'm trying to portray. It takes me a couple of attempts to draw out this cabin. I'm just doing a simple A-frame with a little path leading to a river. For the misty sky, I don't need to draw anything at all. The pumpkin patch, I've never painted a pumpkin patch before, so we're going to see how this goes. I'm going to start with my misty sky. I'm going to be doing wet and wet and using Payne's gray, you can see here, and a little bit of purple gray, a little bit of Moonglow. So I'm going to get my paper wet and then start adding in this paint. I'm flicking my brush back and forth. I just want to suggest an overcast day, maybe a little bit of rain, maybe not. I'm tipping it on its side so that the paint will run down to one corner, suggesting a rainy day. And then in that corner, I'm just soaking up the water that's beating at the bottom there so it doesn't go under my tape. So my next one I'm gonna start working on is my plaid. This actually ended up being the hardest thing to paint. Why? I don't know. I don't know how to paint plaid. So I'm starting with Quinacridone magenta. No, this is Quinacridone red. And I'm putting in some stripes. I'm using a flat brush, which is really helpful to get the same thickness for the stripes. I'm letting all of those things dry. And so I'm working on all of these pieces at the same time. And when one of them's drying, I just move on to the next one. So my pumpkin patch, I'm not doing anything fancy with the sky. I'm putting in ultramarine blue for my blue sky and letting that dry and putting in my field. And then I'm using green gold as my base layer for my pumpkin patch. I'm using those guidelines to sweep the direction I want, which doesn't make that much difference with this first layer, but it is what I'm going to be using as I drop in some darker green. It doesn't really matter the green that you use. I mixed my sky color with that green gold to get a darker green. And now what I'm doing with my cabin painting is I wet the background and now I'm dropping in my fall foliage colors. I'm not doing any sky with this because I really want the cabin to feel like it is just lost in this forest of fall colors. I'm adding in a little bit of green too because I know not all of the trees are, what's the word? They don't all change. Deciduous trees? Help me in the comments. Okay. I'm adding in more of this quinacridone red. I'm adding in some yellow, new Gamboge yellow. I ended up really liking the yellow, so I'm going to add in more of that. That just really feels fallish to me. I'm being careful not to go over my A-frame cabin, which I'm going to end up painting red. I'm using some of that Payne's gray with some blue to add in a little bit of dry brush of my river. This is nothing too fancy. I'm just dragging my brush over the area so that it will leave some of the white paper behind to suggest like ripples or a little froth. And now that my plaid is dry, I'm going in with Payne's gray as well to add in the gray of my plaid. I'm using a bigger brush this time. I'm trying to vary the size of my stripes in my plaid. Again, I'm kind of painting this with my heart. I showed my plaid flannel at the beginning and then I never looked at it again. So as I go, I'm trusting the process because it looks like a bunch of boxes and a bunch of lines and we're just gonna go with it. I'm also using the same colors over and over because I want this to be a set of paintings. I want it to be pretty cohesive. So that Payne's gray I'm using in multiple paintings, the quinacridone red I'm using in multiple paintings, and I'm having some of that darker gray to brush over the river to give some variation of color. I'm using kind of a darker, earthier green. It's not this bright spring green, so I'm taking my green and adding a little bit of brown to it. And then by the river, I'm adding some purple, some sandy color. We're just trying to suggest that it's leading us down into the water. One of my favorite things to do when it gets colder is to rent a cabin and have something called a do nothing weekend, where the point of it is to stay at the cabin. So I choose something on the water, something that's really pretty and cozy, something with a fireplace. You bring your books, you bring your art, you bring your movies, you bring your games, whatever you want to do. Maybe there's a hot tub, and you just park yourself for 48 hours and whatever comes to mind that you want to do, that's how you enjoy your day. I'm painting in my pumpkins now. Why am I doing this? I'm not done with my field. I'm painting in orange pumpkins on top of the green. You know what? I'm going to give myself the benefit of the doubt and say that I'm painting them in to get an idea of where I want the pumpkins to go. And then, I'm going to cover them up with more green. But I'll just say I plan to do it that way. As the field goes back in the distance, my pumpkins get, I do more of them, but they're smaller. So there's more of them in the distance, and then as they get closer to me, there are fewer pumpkins, but they're bigger and more spread out. All right, next up, I'm adding the trunks of my trees on my cabin. I'm spacing them out in a kind of a random way. It looks a little bit more organic. The foliage has dried much lighter behind, so I'll be going in with a brighter, more vibrant detail once those trunks dry. I'm adding in a darker gray at the base of the river to suggest those wet rocks, some shadow. I think my sky is dry at that point, so now I get to add in my telephone pole. This just really encapsulates my commute in the fall. It's always overcast in the Pacific Northwest this time of year, and I love being on the lookout for birds. I know I've talked in one of my other videos how I just love bald eagles, and it's always such a joy just to see them surveying their kingdom. So I'm just using a really thin brush to swoop some power lines. I'm not too worried about it looking perfect, having them kind of overlap. Swoop. And now that my trunks are dry, I'm adding in those same colors I added in initially for the foliage, and I'm just dotting in with my brush those leaf-shaped suggestions. I really like how tucked in this cabin looks. It just feels so cozy, like I want a mug of tea. I want to sit out on the porch and wrap myself in a blanket. It's just the exact vibe I want. Now let's add in that sweet little eagle. I'm using like a gray brown for its body, a little bit of white for its head, a little bit of white for its tail. It's subtle, but it makes me feel happy. So paint what makes you feel happy. What animal do you want to be on top of the telephone pole? Oh, brother. I'm adding in some darker green to my ground area around the cabin. I'm not trying to get too detailed here. I could add in texture of little tufts of grass and stuff like that, but really I'm just having this kind of variation of green, have this moody, dark setting leading down to the water. Okay, I've been avoiding these pumpkins because I knew I put the pumpkins down too soon and that I wanted, so now I'm really trying to paint around them. And so I'm taking the same greens, I'm mixing the ultramarine blue with my green gold. I want it to look like rows of pumpkins. So some of it I want to be dark and some of it I want to be light. This is a lost cause. I'm gonna have to just paint over these pumpkins. It is okay. It still ends up looking cute. I'm adding in another stripe of that red to my plaid. Who knows where she's going? And I'm using a smaller brush to do some thinner stripes of red. Now I'm adding in the color for my cabin. I didn't want it to be as vibrant as that quinacridone red, so I mixed a little dot of my green into the red. And what that does is, because green is the complement of red on the color wheel, it muddies the color just a little bit and it makes it this really kind of weathered red look. And I just really love it. I didn't want it to match the foliage too much. And I'm leaving that roof. I'll paint that once the cabin is dry. There's my cute little path going down, and then it's just going to be about adding little textures here and there, and that one's almost done. We're working on the bottom girls now. Trusting the process. They are in their ugly stage, and we can do it. My tree line in the background, I also wanted to suggest the changing colors of the leaves, so I'm putting in that green gold again, dropping in that yellow, dropping in that red. Again, I want it to be cohesive without being too matchy-matchy. Let's add in a little bit of shadow where the tree line hits. Is it shadow? Is it bushes? Who knows? Got a little shadow at the cabin. This one was really fun to paint. I'm dotting in a little bit of that gray purpley mix for my rock shadow color to give a little bit of texture to the path. And once again, we're doing some Payne's gray brown mixture for the roof. And now's the point in the painting where I painted for 15 minutes and thought I had hit record, and I did not hit record. So here's a dramatic reenactment of what I did in those 15 minutes. Shoop, 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 shoop. Paint, paint, paint. Detail, detail. Shoop, 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 shoop. Color, color, color. Green, green, green. Orange, orange, orange. Ugh. Okay. Dang. Okay, now we're back. Let's keep going. So I'm using my trusty gel pen, just a regular Jelly Roll white gel pen, to add a little bit of trim to my cabin. I'm going to add in a little bit of white down with my rocks to finish that up. And we're going to tackle these pumpkins and the plaid. I'm adding some thin white stripes to my plaid. I learned a lot trying to paint this, having never painted plaid before. I learned that the layers are important. The decision to layer something on top of another is going to drastically make it change how it looks, which should be a duh thing, but I really didn't think about it. With this added white, it starts to look like Swiss to me. I'm not sure why. What I like about the subject matter for these 4 Polaroids is they are all different. We have a cozy cabin, we have a field on a sunny day, we have, a simple sky with not a ton of detail, and then we have a close up of texture. So there's enough variation to feel like it's a cohesive set. Like it clearly has a theme of fall, but there's a zoom in, zoom out aspect to it that I am really happy with. And even though the plaid didn't end up being my favorite, it is still like it's a texture that I associate with fall. So I was really happy with this. I haven't done Polaroids in a couple of years and I forgot how much I like it. I think I should do one for every season. All right, I'm going wild with that plaid. But what's the worst that's going to happen? It looks bad. Oh no, it looks bad. I think it ends up looking fine. I just don't know when to stop. So there is a point where I think I should have stopped and I didn't. So I'll show you where that is. Okay, now that my field is dark enough, I'm going back in with an orange using lots of white gouache because with gouache being opaque, I can mix that with some of my watercolor and layer that on top of the field. I'm going to put in these dots far in the background and then start to change up the color of the pumpkins, adding in more red back into my plaid, trying to vary up the thick lines versus the thin lines. From start to finish, this ended up being about 2 hours of painting, which felt long for how small these were. But I'm doing 4 paintings at once, so it does kind of make sense. But really, you can just get in the zone and move from painting to painting and add little details and touch-ups, and it just is the most relaxing thing. I'm going in with stronger colors for my pumpkins, and I'm mixing white gouache with the same foliage colors I used in my cabin painting. So again, keeping that cohesive color palette. We have yellow pumpkins, red pumpkins, orange, just trying to get a variety so they don't all look samey. I'm adding in some highlights and some lowlights. Again, this is super small, so my details don't have to be really precise. Now for my plaid, I'm adding in a little more black. We're getting to the point where I think I should be done. Okay, here's where I think I should have stopped with the plaid. I think it looks fine. It's cute. It gets at the vibe, but I add a little bit more black and it's also cute and fine. But I think I should have stopped here. I'm adding some really dark bluey green as my darkest shadows under the pumpkins and also to show those rows. I'm adding that dark just to one side of the rose to suggest that shadow. But on this one, as I'm adding this, I am deciding in this moment that everything is really dark. And so what I want to do is add a little bit more light green. I think when I was trying to add in that shadow color, I went overboard a couple of steps ago. So I'm happy with adding in these shadows, but then I want to add some highlights to the tops of those rows where the sun would be hitting these plants. I'm adding in those final highlights to my pumpkins and a little bit of a brown stem to some of them. It's cute. I cannot remember the last time I've been to a pumpkin patch. Decades. Decades? How old am I? Yeah, probably 2 decades. Not since I was a teen. Growing up in Michigan, I always loved going to apple orchards or anywhere where you could pick your own fruit. and apple cider, hot or cold, and donuts. Ugh, I love this season. I'm going one more layer of lighter green gouache to get those very tops of those rows. And the nice thing about that is by adding in that light, I don't need to add more shadow. The shadow is contrasted, so it pops out in greater contrast with the lighter color on top. And we're done and ready to take off the tape. I was worried with this washi tape that maybe it would have bled under the tape, but it really didn't, which is exciting. And then we'll see how they look together as a set. I'm interested if you have other theme ideas beyond just the seasons, but like maybe taking your garden and choosing 4 different vignettes, some close up, some farther back. I think that would be really cute if you're a garden person. I think even your home, I usually stick with nature and landscapes, but your favorite different corners and details of your home, that would be really cute and special. The Polaroid aspect of it just makes it feel really nostalgic and sentimental and sweet, and these would be so cute to give as gifts. So, oops, one's upside down. Let's fix this. If you try it out or have other theme ideas, let me know in the comments, and thanks for watching, everybody. Bye.